And our fabulous Dr. Tony Breyer is going to be facilitating our question and answer session tonight. Dr. Tony Breyer has practiced internal medicine in San Francisco for over 30 years, as well as establishing herself as a physician leader and woman trailblazer in healthcare. She was formerly the president of the San Francisco Medical Society and the first woman chief of staff elected for 2 terms at California Pacific Medical Center. She then joined Sutter Health as a regional chief medical officer, overseeing physician relations and quality care for patients. Most recently, she was the CEO of Sutter Pacific Medical Foundation, the nonprofit organization that supports our work here at the Institute for Health and Healing. Dr. Breyer is passionate about health care for all and walks the talk by leading medical missions. She has assisted the survivors of Hurricane Katrina, the Haiti earthquake, done work in Honduras, and provided volunteer care for the Puerto Rico hurricane and Hurricane Michael in the Gulf Coast last year. Her belief in and support of the work we do at the IHH has been unfailing. I am personally honored to be in the presence of an incredible mentor and woman leader, and we welcome her tonight to moderate the questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Wasn't that a fantastic talk? Yeah. We really want to thank our speakers. You know, just kind of summarizing what we heard from David Schanaker, he talked about what we know and what we don't know, and then taking that leap to make choices and take action, which will then lead us to optimal health. Then right on top of that, Kresser, what I got from him was chronic disease is not a normal state. It's not how we're supposed to be living our life. Diet, behavior, and lifestyle account for 90% of our lifespan. And that's a pretty astonishing statement. He showed us how our lifestyle and environment can change our gene expression. So I think the combination of both of our incredible speakers and their expertise really gives us kind of a blueprint going forward. I know I'm going to make some changes starting tomorrow morning. So thank you. So we'll open it up for questions. There probably won't be much for me to do to moderate since you're going to be coming to a microphone, and I can't really, it's kind of bright.
Hi.
We have our first one.
I have a question. What do you recommend if you wake up in the middle of the night? Like 2, 3, 4, and you're restless and can't get back to bed?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, we can both take it. You know, in functional medicine, we're always trying to get to the root cause of the problem. So the answer to that for you might be different than it would be for somebody else. So the first thing would be to try to figure out why you're waking up. You know, you're waking up because you're having a surge of cortisol, because your HPA axis is out of whack. Are you waking up because your mind is racing and you're having a lot of thoughts about the day? Are you waking up because you're in pain and you've got inflammation? Are you waking up because there's a hormone imbalance and that's affecting your circadian rhythm? So unfortunately it's hard, to answer without knowing more, but one thing that I think can work well in all of those situations is doing some kind of deep relaxation, meditation, body scan, mindfulness-based stress reduction type of technique where you're, and similar to the anchoring technique that David mentioned, where you're really kind of taking your body out of perhaps a fight or flight response, if you're in that when you're waking up, back into the parasympathetic or rest and digest response. And really, as much as possible, not fighting being awake and just accepting it, because I'm sure you've experienced what happens when, I've got to get back to sleep, I'm going to be wrecked tomorrow morning, and that just makes it a lot worse. So as much as you can, like settling into your body and getting into that rest state again.
Nice, great, thank you.
Well, you're in good company, because most of the monasteries that really are hardcore, that's the physiological nadir is around 3 and that's when they get up and meditate.
Oh, so maybe that's what I need to do.
Don't waste it.
Yeah, exactly. 3
You know?
o'clock. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, God, you just programmed my
But
brain.
then it's so much of everything he just said, and then what was the setup, what's the lead up to it, and what's the anxiety level, and what's it about. And the somatic anchoring techniques that I offered, the binaural beats, it's so easy once you get used to a practice of just reaching over, slipping some headphones on, and then going through those rhythms of anchoring your mind back into your body and drifting back. But honestly, it's a great time to meditate.
Like sit up. And...
Get up, do it.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Next question?
Yes, we speak of connection easily, but what do we do about it really in an increasingly disconnected society?
I wish I had an easy answer for that. It definitely is I think one of the issues with our way of life that's least addressed and not talked about enough, that the nuclear, human beings for the vast majority of our evolutionary history lived in tight-knit tribal social groups. And that's actually still the way that human beings live in many parts of the world. Yet today we live in these isolated nuclear family arrangements. So, some of the suggestions I'll make to my patients would be volunteering for something that you care about. That's often a really good way to meet people and connect to people in a meaningful way. Joining activity-themed groups, so like stand-up paddleboarding group or running group, then you get the benefit of social connection with exercise. Taking up a new hobby, going to the pottery studio, or joining another kind of hobby-based group. Like, it does take more effort than it would if we had community naturally built in the way that we have for so many years. But I think it can be created with some effort.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I think that looking at the world as a reason to be connected or not be connected is really a difficult approach. Rather than saying, well, how about today for me in my interactions and in my heart and how I'm going to walk through my day? Because it's profoundly discouraging if you're plugged in to the news all the time and to what's going on in the world. It can be. And so I think that having that perspective of, well, I'm going to be connected today. My day is going to be not that. My day is going to be something else. And having that be your discipline, because, yeah, if you look outside for it, it's too challenging, I think. But when you open up inside to the day, every day, it's just amazing how much connection you get. And when you slow down in nature and look at each flower and look at each plant in a gentle, childlike way, what is revealed? And when you do the same thing with each person you meet in that day, what's revealed? And then, of course, you have all the classes and things you can do for a real overt level. So I hear you, and that's something to be with right now in our world.
Thank you.
Next question. Step right up.
How concerned are you guys with the influence of industry in the production of research for like the viable treatments for chronic illness? Because I saw a lot of recommendations from you guys to address chronic illness, none of which were the production of, any pharmaceutical or some kind of industry-driven treatment that's controlling research. Thank you.
I'm tremendously concerned about it. I think it's one of the biggest hurdles that we face. 2/3 of medical research is sponsored by pharmaceutical companies, and Upton Sinclair has a great quote that I like that I think is relevant here, which is, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary is dependent upon him not understanding it. So there have been studies, lots of studies, that have shown that industry-funded studies are more likely to find results that are favorable to the sponsor. I mean, that's just basic human nature. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. And it's a big issue because we don't have enough public funding for research to get to do the research that needs to be done. And what do pharmaceutical companies want to study? They want to study drug interventions that they can profit from. They don't want to do a longitudinal 30-year study comparing different diets and the effects of lifestyle interventions. No one's going to pay for that study except for a publicly funded agency. So I think it is a big challenge that we face, and one of my passions and the reasons why I do what I do is to try to encourage more science literacy and respect for science in the general public and in kids, because without that, I think we're not going to get the answers that we need.
Yeah, I live with someone who is in this world, and it's just so intense to do really honest, clean, basic science to try and understand questions. And I see how much goes into it and how hard it is, and how especially from Judith, just the sharing of all the forces at play that are out there to move things along. So it's, I remember when I was in chiropractic college, we were talking to the dean about holistic medicine. So, the chiropractors back in the day were doing a lot of this stuff, and so we were talking about, what are the medical doctors and what are the pharmaceutical companies going to think about us doing all these herbs and all these different things? And he said, it's kind of like you're sitting in the weeds on the side of the railroad track and you're just watching a freight train go by. He says, you're not even in the game. There's no money in what you're doing. There's no patents. There's nothing. You're not in the game. So it's kind of the way it is, It's such a drag.
Hi. Because we're being exposed on a daily basis to toxins from what goes in our bodies, putting on our skin and cleaning with, what's your opinion about detoxing, how often to do that? And also the second part of my question is, people are taking so many antibiotics and also being exposed to them in their animals that they're eating. What about testing the microbiome and seeing what's going on? Do you have infections or parasites in there? How important it is to do that in order to heal from the simple things that you're talking about?
That's a great question. I think if you're exercising every day and you're eating whole organic food every day and you're sleeping every day and you're hanging out with your friends every day, you're actually detoxing just by the way you're living, especially the sweating part. And so that's something. So put those building blocks in, like we was talking about, and then yes, see a functional medicine doctor, get the testing, do all the Genova kits, figure out what's going on, figure out what's going on with your microbiome. All that's there and available to you. Come over to the IHH and we'll do that for you. That's what we do.
Yeah, our capacity to detoxify is a function of two things, basically. It's the toxic burden, how much is coming in, and then our capacity to biotransform and excrete those toxins. And so ideally, we want to optimize both of those capacities. So we want to reduce our exposure to toxins as much as we can by choosing better personal care products and cleaning products and modifying all of the modifiable risk factors. Not all of them are for everybody, and this also gets into the social determinants of health. Usually people who are disadvantaged economically live in places where they have less control, and they have less control over it in general. But take every step you can to reduce what's coming in, and then, as David said, do everything you can to improve your body's natural detox capacity. Exercise, sauna, sweating, nutrient-dense food. We have a remarkably effective detoxification system if we give it the inputs that it needs. And yes, I have found that there are situations where either the toxic burden is so high or that the detox capacity is compromised, or both, where more support is needed, and that would come through working with somebody who's got experience with that. In terms of the microbiome, absolutely. I think there's now some consumer-facing labs that offer metagenomic testing, which is called shotgun sequencing. It's a sequencing of the entire microbiome all the way down to the species level. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to start to become very interesting and practical. Right now, we're kind of a little bit in the Wild West. Like, we have all the data, and we're like, whoa, what do we do with this? And you test it 1 week, and then you can test it 2 weeks later without much change, and you see a different result. So there's still a lot of that we don't understand about it, but there's a lot that can be done with the testing that's available through like a functional or integrated medicine provider.
Okay, we're coming toward the end of our program, so I think we'll try to get in as many of these last questions as we can. Maybe just one or the other give an answer, and we'll speed it up. Go ahead.
I think you kind of alluded to an answer to my question, but mine's more about technical with regards to resources. So, I wanted to work with my doctor within the system to get to the root cause of my thyroid, and it's limited as far as what testing they could do, et cetera. And so I wanted to ask, because I just read the beginning of your book about the kid, and I have a 7-year-old. So I just wanted to know from a resource perspective, I'm not that familiar with IH, of how we can work within the system, but to get the extra testing and to get to the root cause of health issues. So I don't know if you could point to, I'm sure your website, but something more specific about lab tests, et cetera.
David, that might be you to talk a little bit about IHH and what we can offer her.
We have, we have a program, and we're actually right over here in Nevada now. And we have primary care, and then we have our group, and we have functional medicine doctors that you can see, physicians, MDs, that will do all those testing for you.
Right, so but within, from an insurance perspective for people that are limited to certain insurance because of...
Everybody's different with their insurance and what they will pay. Some insurances most of them are fine with the physicians. And then if you're going to work with, say, me, a chiropractor, it might be not in your program, acupuncture might be or might not, psychotherapy generally is. And so, just call.
Well,
and
so Chris, I think
instead of being so individualistic,
that's what I mean. I'm asking about public resources for testing, your own allergies and things like that. So is there a way to have access to that information? Because
you mean not through a physician?
Right, so that you could be an advocate for your own health, so you can be a partner to your doctor, if you want to work within the system that you're in.
Not really. I mean, there are some direct-to-consumer labs available now, but it's tricky. You have to know how to interpret them, what to do with that information, and it gets complex. So, unless it's something relatively simple, like glucose level or something like thyroid, is it Hashimoto's, is it autoimmune,
Right.
There's a lot there.
Right.
So
well, I'm a healthcare professional, so in that way, so just
So
I'm just
because we're running out of time, why don't we take this offline?
Okay.
You can talk with David or Chris afterward,
Okay.
and we'll get it figured out.
Okay, thank you.
Next.
Good evening. I work in social services for older adults, and I've done a lot of reading and studying about the blue zones, and both of your talks reminded me about the 5 blue zones in the world where people live to be 100 or older, but healthy, at much higher rates than anywhere else in the world. So in addition to the 5 or 6 factors that you named, red wine is one of them in blue zones, faith and sense of purpose. So I was wondering if one of you could comment on how to integrate that into all that you've talked about this evening.
A year and a half ago, I went to Sardinia for a long time to go and check it out for myself. And I was on a motorcycle and rode a lot. And after a few days, you kind of figure it out right away. You go in a restaurant and you say, well, where's this fish from? They look out the window. Where's this wine from? I remember this place right over there. What are you doing this evening? I want to hang out with the family. Tell me about your community. We go back 2,000 years. So it has that whole vibe of we belong, we're here, life is simple, we connect. And guys come from all over the world to Sardinia in May to romp around on their motorcycles. So once I figured that out, it was just about the motorcycles. But that's really the thing. I think it's right there. It's a combination of all those things you just said. But a sense of belonging, I felt like there was a lot of the conversations I had where they would say, oh, your community is not even, I mean, it's an infant. I mean, I was one restaurant, I was leaning back against the wall and I asked the maitre d' about the place, and he said, well, that wall was built 300 BC. So people have been sitting in a restaurant leaning against a wall since 300 BC in the same place. And that's like, it gives you this, I think, a sense of continuity. And at least that area of the Blue Zone, there was that piece, you know.
So I want to honor the time that we've all committed to this tonight, and there are 3 people standing for questions left. I'm going to commit our 2 speakers to talking with you afterward and answering your questions directly. You'll have perfect access to them. But I want to take this time to thank everyone for coming tonight. I think our speakers deserve a huge round of applause. They were fabulous. And before we end, I want to also give a shout out to the facility here, to the JCC, for letting us have this program here, for our terrific staff at the Institute for Health and Healing, who this doesn't just happen by itself. They've done a lot of planning, and they, I think, also deserve a big round of applause.